And welcome back to the You Dad Me a Hello podcast. It's a show about two dads and their opinions on film, TV, and wrestling. You didn't ask for it, but here we are anyways. Joining Andy and I today, we do have a special guest to help us get through our next topic, and his name is Ryan. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Awesome, super talkative. What did you, what got you here today? What do you do in life? Who are you? How do you know us?
Well, I know you guys from high school. We all went to high school at Cranston High School East. We were also all part of a backyard wrestling, UWA, and its premiere show, UWA Chaos. Lots of hard-hitting action there, and lots of illegal use of a Benny's parking lot. And but since then, we've all kept in touch. I've since moved from the Rhode Island area. I'm currently living in Bayonne, New Jersey with my wife, Jamie. And we are looking to come back to the New England area. And but for right now, we're just hanging in there with everything that's going on and just trying to enjoy as much of everything as we can.
Nice. Right, I think you gave more of a biography than we did about ourselves. We host the damn show.
That's true. Andy, who are you? Just in case a listener is joining us.
You don't need to know who I am. Just enjoy the relaxing sounds of my voice and my opinions. And if you don't want to, don't listen.
That's a great endorsement for the show.
That's officially my favorite ASMR. It's just like I want to be lulled to sleep by Andy's opinions.
Usually you are.
I like how you said good afternoon, RJ, as if we dictate when people will listen to this.
I'm probably going to release it to the world during the afternoon, so just feel like, why not? It is 9 at night, people, so.
People will probably be listening to this while sitting on the toilet, so.
But science has proven that people go to the toilet the most during the afternoon, so check and mate, Andy.
Well, I did not know those facts, so I stand corrected.
So anyways, today's episode is about top 90s shows. So we included basically any shows that were a part of our childhood in the 90s. It had to be on live in the 90s. So it could have started in the 80s or gone all the way to the 2000s, but it had to be live on TV during the 90s. We did also remove talk shows and news shows for the most part. So this is straight everything else pretty much. We couldn't include everything. We did start with 64 when we first brought all of this together. So some of the shows you may not hear about now because they're long gone, which include shows like ER is now no longer on the list. The Magic School Bus is no longer on the list. Sabrina the Teenage Witch is no longer on the list. Step by Step, Dawson's Creek. And so if you're listening and you're like, hey, why didn't that show make it? It's because it's already been voted out. You're picking up here on the top 32 TV shows of the 90s. And so if you have any thoughts, if you don't agree with us or you do agree with us, please hit us up at facebook.com/youdadmeathello. And feel free to comment. Let us know that we're completely wrong or crazy for not including this show or that show. This is opinion only. And so if we like terrible shows, there's going to be a terrible winner. But hopefully Ryan will steer us correctly because he probably has a more sophisticated taste than the two of us.
Or not. I probably don't. I'll probably just, if this ship is going down like the Titanic, I'm probably just right there playing the violin.
All right. Well, hey, let's get started. Top 90s TV shows. We're going to go through a bracket of 32 all the way till we get to the finals. And so let's start off with the first bracket, Home Improvement versus Judge Judy. Who wants to start off?
I want to start off because I'm in a bad mood just because Judge Judy is on this list. It should not be on the list whatsoever. It shouldn't have been in the top 64. The fact that it's in the top 32 is beyond comprehensible for me. So I don't even have to explain why I like Home Improvement 100 times better than Judge Judy. Home Improvement is the winner.
Okay. Well,
Don't say Judge Judy. I swear, do not say Judge Judy.
So obviously I've matured more than you have over the years, because when I was a child, I also hated Judge Judy. But over time, once you become an adult, you realize, no, Judge Judy is awesome, and everything she says to stupid little children is correct. And I have grown to love her. Every time I stayed home from school, I watched Judge Judy.
As an adult? You just said as an adult you like Judge Judy.
I liked her back then too. I just, sometimes
Don't
as a kid I was
contradict
like,
yourself
Judge
here.
Judy, don't treat people like that. And now I'm all like, Judge Judy, hit him in the face. So I'm going to vote Judge Judy on this one over Home Improvement, only because I can't tell you really one big storyline from Home Improvement. I mean, I watched it all the time, but did they ever get serious? Was there really anything other than a dumb 23-minute, comedy fest? Was there any story arcs?
They absolutely did get serious at points. I mean, just about every sitcom in the 90s probably had that very special episode. But I can tell you right off the bat that the first one that comes to mind when it comes to Home Improvement is, I mean, it wasn't like an arc, and I don't think a lot of these shows or a lot of these sitcoms did an arc. If it was like they did something very serious, it was usually contained within those 30 minutes. But the first thing that comes to mind with Home Improvement is they had an episode where, I'm trying to think who the middle child was. It was Jonathan Taylor Thomas that played him. But they had an episode where he had like a cancer scare, and he had gone to the doctors and they were not sure. And like the remainder of the episode was basically them playing the waiting game and watching this kid just like deal with the idea that he might have cancer. Yeah. That was probably one of their more serious episodes.
That's true. And his name was Randy, and it was called The Longest Day.
Yes.
Yeah, I forgot about that one. So what's your vote, Ryan?
It's always interesting. It seems to fall under this like show type where it's this generally popular comedian somehow just gets their own show. And like, that was the thing, because like Tim Allen was a stand-up. I mean, I think there's some other shows on this bracket that fall into that category. I know there's some shows not on this bracket that fall into the category, like the Drew Carey Show. Same thing. Like it's some sort of show that is loosely based on their stand-up. And I think it's something to be said, though, that Home Improvement, which I think I would consider a successful 90s show. I mean, it had a pretty good run. I would think that it probably had pretty good ratings. So that probably also speaks to, there is something sort of universal about Tim Allen's stand-up, at least back then, or at least there was something that was relatable about it. The one thing I will say Tim Allen really probably has going against him is I think he is stuck in that era. If you ever watch him today in like a Jimmy Fallon sort of situation, he's almost going for like the same humor, and like you can hear a pin drop sometimes with the studio audience. But for the 90s, for that time, something really resonated with his stand-up, and it resonated across a wider field of people than it probably would today. The thing with Judge Judy, though, is that Judge Judy just has the train wreck factor, which is you're watching these things that are supposedly real. They're supposedly not actors, because there's plenty of court procedurals in that same format that are absolutely scripted, and they are 100% not legitimate whatsoever. Supposedly these are unscripted, because the whole point of the format of the show is supposed to be that it's not a court per se. They have decided to give up their civil suits, and they are going to her as a mitigator. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there is supposed to be something legitimate about it, but I mean, the thing she has going for it is the sort of train wreck factor, where it's like there'll be something really outrageous or really ridiculous that will grab your attention. So between the two, I think I'm gonna have to give it to Home Improvement, because
all right.
I thought I was gonna throw everything. Thank goodness.
Well, Home Improvement moves to the second round. We are now moving on to a odd pairing of Hey Dude from Nickelodeon and Everybody Loves Raymond.
All right, so I never watched Hey Dude. It was always something that like my friends talked about, like a summer camp or something like that. It was just never my thing. So I said, let me Google Hey Dude and see what this is all about. And then my wife was like, oh, I remember this show. And I saw some recognizable faces, and I watched a minute clip, and that's all I ever wanted to see. Because that 1 minute, I wanted to run away. It seemed really poorly acted and trying to be funny, and it wasn't. Whereas Everybody Loves Raymond is one of my favorite shows. It's just got this, the brother dynamic with the annoying mother, coming over to the house all the time. It's just now being a father, I can kind of relate to Raymond even more. Like when he's downstairs, like in his boxers, like vacuuming the carpet. Like I was like, yeah, that's life right there. Like that's how and he's in the basement working. I'm like, yep, I'm an outcast like that too. So he's just a normal guy, and he just makes life funny.
That is not fair to watch Hey Dude when you were 36 years old and expect it to be good. It is not good 36 years later, but at the
Don't age me.
time, it was great. It was a great show. I mean, Christine Taylor was in that show. Went on to
Yeah,
marry Ben
that was the clip
Stiller.
I
Thank you,
watched.
Hey Dude. And it was great. It has 5 seasons of TV. It was great. The theme song was amazing. Everything about it. However,
Theme song was cool.
I do like Everybody Loves Raymond, but for me, it's like you said. I only watch that if it's on in my parents' house and I happen to be sitting there, and I'll laugh. It's okay, but you would never see me trying to stream Everybody Loves Raymond these days. Hey Dude, yeah, I'll check that out again. So my vote's for Hey Dude on this one.
My thoughts on Hey Dude is that I think there is a lot to like about that show, but everything that I think I like about that show has to do with the nostalgic factor. It's not because I know I don't remember when we actually had Nickelodeon in our house. I'm pretty sure I must have been in grade school at the time, but I feel like I don't know where Hey Dude was, because what year did it actually start?
It was
recall?
89 to 91.
Okay. By the time we likely had cable set up in our house, it might have already been done, I think. I wouldn't be surprised if Hey Dude was already done. I do remember seeing bits of it if I was visiting a family's house and, they had Nickelodeon on. The stuff that I appreciate about Hey Dude was like, that was their first crack at the live action show, like a live action sort of sitcom show on Nickelodeon, because they did a whole bunch of other stuff after, but it all started with them. Same thing, like, yeah, I remember the theme song, and like I remember like certain elements about it, but it's only because it gives me that nostalgic feeling. I don't really have any sort of recall of actually enjoying the show during its run.
So tell us why you're gonna vote for Everybody Loves Raymond.
Because it's a better show.
All right, Everybody Loves Raymond.
But because Andy sort of covered that. It is very relatable in its own way, and I mean, like the fun irony of that show is that when you really watch it, it's like, no, nobody loves Raymond. His mom may, but like, there's like the thing is like he is a very like everybody loves him, but he is like probably one of the more problematic people in that family, like causing most of the trouble.
All right. Okay. So Everybody Loves Raymond. Moving on to round 2. The next one is sort of a sketch show battle. Whose Line Is It Anyway versus In Living Color. This is a tough one.
This was really tough. In Living Color was really I feel like it was like an anti SNL. They were more edgy. They had that hip hop vibe to it. They always had the hip hop artists on there performing at the end. The dancing, the DJ, the comedians on there again were a lot more edgy, and they talked about things that were happening at the time. You had, like Jim Carrey doing the Vanilla Ice, Ice Ice Baby, rap, and just Jamie Foxx, fantastic on it. The Wayans brothers, it feels like everybody that was on that show just about went on to do something great, as far as movies or comedy. And Whose Line Is It Anyway? You don't really get that. I think besides like Wayne Brady, Drew Carey, everybody else kind of stuck to that. But there's a longevity to Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's a very, I always throw this word out, relatable. I think anybody can watch Whose Line Is It Anyway and laugh. Whether you like something that's more PG or you like something a little bit more edgy, they kind of play to both. And I've actually heard that they do a lot more dirty jokes and they just cut it out. But for the live fans that are there, they get the more edgy kind of stuff. But I love In Living Color, but I think I'm going to go with Whose Line Is It Anyway, just for that longevity. And it's one of those shows you can just turn on at any time and laugh.
Ryan, I feel like you'd have a lot to say about this, considering your background.
This is very, very tough. Very, very tough. Kind of bouncing off of what Andy was saying about Whose Line, and my experience with workshopping and practicing that sort of short form improvisation. The general idea with, the edge factor with that is almost unfair, not entirely, because half of that is what the network is going to allow to air, but the other half of that, from like a live perspective, is you're only going to be as blue as the audience wants you to be in that sort of situation. Anytime like I've worked with like a short form group, it's been like, don't go dirtier than the audience is asking for. Let them bring you to that level, because then they're telling you that's what they want to see. If you just sort of bring it upon yourself to do it, it usually falls flat. To that end, though, I will say there is some really great stuff online, from old Whose Line clips of stuff that did not air. There's particularly one where there's a clip where Drew Carey had a real problem with the producers on an episode, and he is visually being like argumentative with them, not like too harshly. But he asked the audience, they were going to do, I think the game was to do a sitcom theme song. And the audience said they wanted to see a sitcom with Bill Cosby and Adolf Hitler. And the producer came right out, went up to Drew Carey and said, you can't do it. You can't do it. And the rest of the night, and I think most of this footage probably didn't make it to air, Drew Carey just basically took a jab at like, oh, you can do this, but hey, don't mention Hitler, like that, and like they were really sort of taking these jabs at the fact that they couldn't do that kind of stuff. In Living Color, also, like, I completely agree with everything that Andy is saying. This was also on during a time, I think this was probably one of the, I don't know if it was one of the launch shows for Fox as a network, but I mean, it was airing around the same time that a lot of the other launch shows happened, and they were trying to have a very specific identity separate from NBC, ABC, CBS, where they were supposed to be that sort of edgy network. And the stuff it's almost a shame within Living Color is that I think some of the real smart stuff is the stuff that doesn't get remembered. Everyone seems to remember a lot of the real outrageous like characters, like particularly Jim Carrey's characters. Like if you tell someone like, what do you remember about In Living Color, they'll probably talk about like Fire Marshal Bill. Mm-hmm. And Fire Marshal Bill was probably one of the least funny characters on that show.
I didn't like Fire Marshal Bill.
He was fine. Like it was fine for what it was, but like there was so much about
Head Detective.
Show. Yeah, well, but even like stuff like that. But I mean, like
great.
They did really walk that line, and they were really trying to make a statement. See, I think it was a first season episode they sort of addressed at like the opening monologue. It was Keenan Ivory Wayans and I think Damon Wayans, because I think they usually opened the show, and like right away they asked like, people come up to us all the time and they say like, why do you only seem to make fun of white people? And like, it seems like that's always your target. And like, well, to be honest with you, it's actually a random thing. Like we're trying to be diplomatic about it, and we actually have a random way of doing this, and we'll show you. And it was like, they brought out this sort of like Wheel of Fortune style wheel, and they said like, whatever this wheel lands on is who we're gonna offend in that episode. And like every single segment of it said white people, and then they had one pie that was split up into all of the other groups. And that's so it obviously and lands on one of it's like, oh, guess we're doing that one again. Like, so like they were really great about sort of pushing that, and a lot of really talented people came out of that show. The one thing I will say that is probably really working against it is a lot of stuff does not age well with that show. But a good friend of mine once told me, the thing about comedy is that it's in like a social sort of setting, it's usually the first thing to make the progressive statement. It's usually the first thing to get ahead of the line with progress, but it also tends to be one of the last things to leave when things start changing around it. I really don't know what to pick with this one. I'd like to actually hear RJ's argument first before I would cast a vote.
Copping out.
Well, for me, so I don't want to waste too much time here, but you guys have said a lot. In Living Color, the reason I like it is because it's had so many people that I still like today, that have come out from it. I mean, all the Wayans brothers, Kim Wayans, Tommy Davidson, David Allen Greer, Sean Wayans, Jamie Foxx was on it for a little while. So all those, and then not to mention the Fly Girls with Jennifer Lopez and Rosie Perez. Just a bunch of different people. Like you said, though, I don't know. For me, In Living Color, when it was good, and when it didn't hit, it really didn't hit. Like there was a bunch of skits that I was just like, it's okay. So my vote's going to be for Whose Line Is It Anyway? Only because it's a show that I can pick up right now and laugh at it, and they can still do it right now, and it's just still funny. Plus those four, I mean, so many of the people, Greg Proops, I think was his name, right? Hilarious dude. And the main cast there. Drew Carey was good. They did a revival for a little while with, even that was good too. Aisha Tyler,
Thank you.
was her name. Did a great job. So it's a show that honestly you could throw any four people in there as long and keep up the kind of same same kind of format, and it's still going to be pretty funny as long as they're good at comedy. Ryan Stiles, Colin Mockery, obviously the two major ones. But...
And also, it started in the UK too, so I mean, it has a much longer history than we're really giving it credit. It did not start with Drew Carey. It started with Clive Anderson as the host.
So a couple things. Number one, Ryan, your vote no longer needed. Whose Line moves on. But if you're gonna choose, throw it out there. Whose Line or In Living Color?
In Living Color, in the sense that
it doesn't matter.
No, not in the sense that it doesn't matter, because I think in the sense that there should be more comedy like that today, and okay. I think there probably is, but I not enough of it is really hitting the mainstream.
Okay, so moving on, we're going to try to bullet through these next couple ones here so we can get through the first round in a good amount of time. So tell me your thoughts. Rugrats versus Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. My vote already. Rugrats. Always will, always will. Mr. Rogers, great dude. But half the show I tuned out. Once he left the house and went into the make-believe land, I was like, I'm out. So Rugrats for me. Tommy Pickles for life.
I'm gonna agree with you. Mr. Rogers, obviously a different kind of impact and over more generations, but there's only so long you watch it. You might watch it for a year and go, that was cool. That made me somewhat of a better person. But Rugrats is just, so many memorable moments and characters. So I'm going with Rugrats as well.
Ryan?
Again, vote doesn't matter at this point. But
what are you throwing out there?
Well, I personally, I mean, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is definitely resonating a lot today with people, and I mean, I think it's also the main thing that's resonating is uh, where's the next Mr. Rogers sort of thing. And personally, I don't think there's going to be another one. In this particular case, though, I don't have any problem giving it to Rugrats because we're talking about 90s TV, and I think Rugrats out of the two would definitely personify 90s TV better.
Mm. Okay, awesome. So we have Rugrats moving on to the second round. Next up is Golden Girls versus Friends. This one seems to hurt you, Andy.
It doesn't hurt me, but it's definitely a tough one. Golden Girls was hilarious. Just the bond that all four of them had. It's weird because you're like, a kid in the 90s. You're like, how am I going to relate to a bunch of, 60, 70-year-old women? How's this going to be funny? They made it funny. Their little innuendos that they had, there was a lot of digs. But on the same token, Friends, I mean, my wife, I've watched that series probably 15 times over, and can probably say every quote that there is. It's iconic. You had 6 characters that all in their individual ways, stood out. And, there's still people who are like, oh, I'm a Chandler, I'm a Ross, I'm a Joey, whatever. There's little pop-ups that happen with Friends. Like, you think about the 90s and TV, Friends is always at the top of someone's list. Whether they loved it or they hated it, because there's a lot of people that hate that show. But for me, I got to go with Friends.
All right.
Even though the theme song is horrible.
I love that theme song. The Rembrandts? How do you hate that song? Both of these songs. Thank You for Being a Friend by the Golden Girls. I mean, amazing song.
That's a great that's great. Yeah. But if I listen to it every day for the last 15 years, I'd probably hate it.
That's true. Ryan, how about you? Let's have you do second here.
I'm going to go with Golden Girls on this one.
Okay. You're putting me in
because he's a 90-year-old woman, but no.
Well, I mean, they both my
Ryan,
reasoning.
We're not doing based off of looks.
My reasoning also it almost contradicts my last reasoning with the last bracket, because in a way I think Friends does sort of personify 90s better than Golden Girls would, but at the same time I think that's the case because the thing that personifies 90s for them is not necessarily the humor. I think it's the aesthetic. I think it's the way things look in the show. Except I think that I'm going to give it to Golden Girls because I think Friends is like a good example of a 90s time capsule. But Golden Girls, which premiered, I think, in the 80s probably.
It did, yeah.
Probably late 80s. And going through the 90s, it still feels sort of, there's still a sort of modern to it, which I think that's what is just giving it the win for me.
All right, I love both. Theme song alone, Golden Girls wins, but Friends for me. I watched all the seasons. I haven't seen every episode of the Golden Girls. I can say I have seen every Friends episode. And it's just classic 90s. Golden Girls has an 80s vibe to it for me. They never got out of the 80s kick. Even the look of the show, the color of the show was very 80s feel as well. But Golden Girls crossed some boundaries and lines in the 80s where they talked a lot about different things, racial issues and LGBTQ issues and all of that deal. They crossed some lines and boundaries that 80s shows didn't do. So that was really cool to see. Also sexuality, especially for 4 older women, to talk about it so freely was a really big deal. But Friends, overall, it's one of those shows it does have story arcs over the whole series, but you don't have to watch every episode to know what's going on. So I'm going to go with Friends. So Friends moves on to the second round. Next one is a mashup, Sliders versus Family Matters. Very odd pairing here. I'm going to start just because Sliders is one of my all-time favorite shows. Sliders is a great show. I think the professor in that show is from Indiana Jones, if I'm not mistaken. It's a great show. It's a great show. Family Matters though brings the nostalgia, and it had a lot of serious moments. I love serious moments in sitcoms. There needs to be some. I want to cry during a 30-minute comedy show, and Family Matters just does it for me. They have a lot of serious moments. The moment that comes to mind is when Eddie gets pulled over by two white cops, or a white and a black cop, I can't remember, and his father comes to his kind of rescue, and there's this huge blowout scene in the restaurant where he's like, "You pulled over my son," and he's like, "Well, if I knew it was your son, I wouldn't have pulled him over," and he's like, "But if he wasn't my son, you pulled him over because he's black," and it was like just this real moment that like still lives today. You could watch that now and you're like, "Yep, okay, I get it." So I'm gonna go Family Matters. It hurts me, but Family Matters.
I'm gonna agree. I'm gonna pick Family Matters as well, just for everything that you mentioned, and it was funny. Urkel is just slapstick kind of comedy, and here's the whole Stefan thing, and always trying to win her heart. And then Sliders, I actually watched a little bit of, so I did have some, that was a little bit familiar to me, but it really wasn't anything memorable. Maybe because I didn't watch the entire series. I'm not a big sci-fi kind of guy. I was more for that comedic, TGIF. That was my jam. I waited till Friday, watched that step by step, and basically any other show that they put on there. Dinosaurs.
Hanging with Mr. Cooper.
Hanging with Mr. Cooper. I actually saw Hanging with Mr. Cooper, Mark Curry at an airport one time, and I was with my brother, and here he is, and he's a very tall gentleman. I saw him talking to somebody, like a worker there. And my brother, who's a lot younger than me, I was like, "Oh, look, Hanging with Mr. Cooper." And he's like, "Who?" And I never felt more old in that moment. So instead of me going up and saying hey, I just kept walking my head hanging low. And yeah. But anyways, Family Matters. That's my pick.
Family Matters is moving on. However, Family Matters or Sliders?
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, because both of these shows fall into sort of the same category.
Oh, Ryan, Family Matters moves on.
No, I know. I know it does. All I was going to say was both of these fall into the same category for me, whereas I remember loving them both when I watched them, but I couldn't tell you a thing about them today.
Got any cheese?
Yeah, I mean, like this, that kind of stuff. Yeah, sure. But like between the two, for me, like if I had to pick, like if I was going to go on Netflix or Amazon Prime and say, like, okay, which one do I want to watch? I'd probably want to rewatch Sliders before I'd want to rewatch Family Matters. But I will say there is something very, very nostalgic and very, very heartwarming about the idea of the TGIF lineup. It really was, like, in my house, like it was something to look forward to each week, even if those shows are really not the best shows. There was something to like about that lineup.
We should have all practiced the Urkel dance and
Doing the
done that
Urkel?
collectively. The Urkel, yeah.
If you want people to watch the show, then it's probably best we
that
did
will
it.
get them.
All you gotta do is hike up your pants.
We
So-
don't see that.
The next one is The Simpsons and Salute Your Shorts.
I'm going with The Simpsons. At the time in the 90s, I watched it a lot, and then it's been on for the last 75 years, and I haven't really watched it much, but iconic. Salute Your Shorts I didn't watch either, even though it had a great theme song. I remember at summer camp, like, a bunch of kids would literally sing that every day, and I was like, what are you guys talking about? And then I saw it on Nickelodeon, and I was like, at that point I was so like annoyed by these kids singing that song. I didn't want to watch it, because again, I'm that person who, if you talk about it enough, I'm just gonna write it off.
Yeah, I know. You still haven't seen Hamilton with me yet.
and I still won't. But I will watch
So
it
angry.
secretly and not tell you, and
No.
just to annoy you.
You need to see your face when you're watching it.
It's creepy. So who are we talking about? Simpsons.
Simpsons,
Simpsons
all
is my
right.
pick.
Simpsons
Yeah.
for you. Ryan, Simpsons or Salute Your Shorts?
I loved Salute Your Shorts when that was on. To this day, I wish I could have been part of a capture the flag game like they had in Salute Your Shorts. If you need to go back and watch any episode, just look up the episode where they play capture the flag. It makes actual games of capture the flag just seem boring and just like you're not trying. Simpsons though, I mean, there's something just too iconic about it to. As much as I love Salute Your Shorts, it's not enough for me to push it ahead of something like The Simpsons. I have to. I mean, it might sound kind of like I'm just falling in with the crowd, but it's a good crowd to be in. I gotta go with Simpsons.
All right, I wanted to go with Salute Your Shorts, but that comment you just made there makes sense. It's kind of hard to push something past The Simpsons. Simpsons has been on 31 seasons. It is surpassed decades of humor and relevance. I don't like The Simpsons personally. I wouldn't sit there and watch the show. I have watched the show plenty of times as a child. I find it funny back in the day. It's just not my thing. I'm also not an animated guy, so that's kind of partly it. What were you gonna say, Andy?
I think they also predicted that you were going to pick them in probably an episode.
That's probably true. They were like, hey, there's going to be a podcast with 2 dads and an actor, and they're going to be talking about our show.
But I will say, I think that Futurama is a better show. When comparing Matt Groening work, I think Futurama is the better show.
So Simpsons moves on to the second round. Next up is a weird pairing, Law & Order SVU or Boy Meets World. Just in case you wanted a little bit of seriousness and sexual assault, and Boy Meets World, and actually sexual assault. There is also an episode on sexual assault in Boy Meets World.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, Topanga gets sexually, I wouldn't say assaulted, maybe, I can't remember, but it's actually by the dude from the Wonder Years, Boy Meets World's brother.
Fred
can't
Savage.
remember his name. Fred Savage. Yeah, so.
I kind of vaguely remember that.
Boy Meets World all the way. That's my vote. No explanation needed.
Yeah, Boy Meets World for me as well. I didn't watch Law & Order SVU only because I wasn't 30 in the 90s. Yeah, it's something like if my mom comes over and she has I log into Netflix for her, like I come back and it's like 7 episodes watched. And I'm like, great, now I got this in my watch list. Like, I still to this day I've watched bits and pieces of it and I'm like I can't get into it. So Boy Meets World.
All right.
Boy Meets World could have gone up against like anybody. I'm sorry, SVU could have went up against anybody and I would have picked the other show.
Ryan?
I mean, we watch a lot of SVU in our house.
I love SVU too, so
I like it a lot. I think I mean again, I'm already voted out. I think I would have gone with SVU only because I feel like Boy Meets World kind of jumped the shark early for me.
What?
It kind of jumped the shark early for me. I mean, I do appreciate there's certain moments when it got a little bit, when it started taking itself a little less seriously in elements, particularly like any storyline that had to do with Eric seemed like it was willing to take itself that much less seriously. Almost to the point where you're watching 2 different shows at the same time. I think like there was like an episode like I think he's having a disagreement with Matthew Lawrence's character. I couldn't tell you any of the names of the characters in it. Just so, I mean, except for the main ones. But like Matthew Lawrence was in it later on, and he and Eric are sort of best friends later during the show. And they had an episode where they have their story is like a fight. They have a fight throughout most of their B story. I think it's over a girl probably. And it seems like they resolve it. And then they hint that something's going to just start the fight all over again. And the next thing you see is one of them just punch the other one in a very, very blatant way. And they're starting to have almost this mini fist fight on a couch. And it is weirdly funny. And it's meant to be funny. But again, I think despite that, I think the show in itself just, even in the realm of a sitcom, it became too unbelievable for me at one point.
Can I say that Corey Matthews is probably one of the most unlikable main characters of any TV show? I just felt like he was a little nitwit, and
I could also tell you when it jumped the shark for me. The
What is
idea it was when he and Topanga got married, because the idea like they portrayed them so young, or they had this something about them that they seemed so young. I'm like, they're married now, and like they had this really ridiculous scene of like their wedding night, and I'm like, why? What am I watching right now? Like it's like it was a little too unbelievable to me.
All right.
We're about to
cute to
watch.
Minkus.
So
Yeah, exactly.
Boy Meets World moves on to round 2. We got a couple more to finish out round 1. Celebrity Deathmatch and Full House. Very odd random pairing here.
I don't even have to explain Full House.
Full House.
Full House. Just
All right, we're just moving on to Full House.
Sorry, celebrity.
All right.
Sorry, Claymation.
Celebrity Deathmatch still a cool show, but
It was cool. I mean, it was original, but what do you remember more?
Sort of lost
That's
its
true.
appeal very quickly to me.
It did.
That's true. X-Files and Rescue 911.
I'm gonna let you guys speak to this because I didn't watch either.
You didn't watch either of these shows?
No.
All right.
I'm not sci-fi.
X-Files, great show, but didn't catch my interest. I couldn't tell you one storyline from it. Mulder and Scully, that's the smoking man. I think those are the 3 things I know about that show. My vote's Rescue 911 for nostalgia reasons. It was a storytelling of rescue, of people calling 911. That's pretty much it. I remember a baby sitting in a high chair going through a deck window. And having to be rescued. So reenactments, it's just nostalgic.
That sounds like a lot of fun, RJ.
How about you, Ryan?
I'm sort of in a very similar situation with Andy, where I didn't watch a ton of either.
Okay.
I watched a little bit of probably both, but you know what? I'm gonna give the vote to Rescue 911 on the basis that I'm sort of on a true crime kick. And like I can appreciate that a little bit more. Never really got into X-Files. I mean, I can appreciate what it is, and I can appreciate the appeal it has, but it was just it never clicked with me when it first aired.
I'm gonna imagine that
did-
we're gonna make a lot of people mad on this podcast.
I mean,
We just
neither
threw
did
out
Rescue
X-Files
911.
over Rescue.
But I mean, even like Unsolved Mysteries is starting to have a resurgence because it's back on Netflix.
That's true.
I feel like this is gonna make a lot of people mad because like if I was just going off of like who do I remember, like when I saw Rescue 911, I was like, Reno 911, like oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, but we'll get the Trekkies on our side because William Shatner hosted it.
Oh really? Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, yeah, whatever.
Thank you for joining us this week for the You Dad Me at Hello podcast, Top 90s Shows. Please join us next week as we dive into part 2 of the Top 90s TV shows with our special guest, Ryan.